My name is Era, and I'm the host of the Tamil Creator Podcast. I chat with creators from all over the world to share their stories and discuss hot topics in a way that I hope inspires, educates, and entertains you. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Tamil Creator. I'm your host, Era, and today we have a super exciting guest. Her name is Sharon Bala. She's well known for her award-winning novel called Boat People, which I read and was a huge fan of. And it's really around the story about a refugee named Mahindan who flees Sri Lanka with his son on a cargo ship bound for Canada. And then when he arrives, there's kind of a lot of turmoil and kind of, twists and turns. But it's just really around him, just like many other Tamils who kind of escaped from Sri Lanka, the Civil War, and just kind of his story when he landed here. And it was inspired by the MV Sun Sea and the Ocean Lady, which saw the real arrival of Sri Lankan refugees back in 2010 and 2009. So it's definitely like a great read, but obviously Sharon, beyond this particular project, she's wrote some other novels as well, or done some other pieces, which we're going to talk about today. So Sharon, why don't you do the justice of kind of introducing yourself, talking about your kind of upbringing and family, and then kind of jumping into how that kind of created the spark for your love of writing that you have today.
Hi, thanks for having me. So The Boat People is my first and so far only novel, but I've written a number of short stories that have been mostly published in tiny literary magazines that no one reads. And I grew up mainly in the GTA in Pickering. And really my first memory of writing was in grade 3. My teacher would give us these like foolscap papers and say, write stories. And that was like my favorite thing to do. I don't even remember what I wrote about. And I wrote like that just for fun all through elementary school, all through high school. In high school, I would come home and just spend hours writing these really terrible novels about teenagers who would get trapped on an island and then be picked off one by one by a crazy serial killer. That was always the thing. And then I graduated high school and went to university, and I thought, okay, that's it. I got to do something that's going to get me a real job, because I just didn't think that author was a real job that someone like me could have. And so, I had a first career in communications, in public relations, which actually was the perfect first career for being a writer. And I did that through my 20s and at the very beginning of my 30s. And then I moved to St. John's, Newfoundland, where I didn't know anybody and winters are really long. And I hadn't written in like 10 years, but I took a writing class, just like an evening writing class once a week. And I thought it would be a good way to do something fun and maybe meet some people. And I rediscovered that I love to write. And, I had been writing mostly garbage when I was younger. And in this writing class, it was the first time I really learned how to write like an adult, like a grown-up. And at the end of that semester, I had like a number of short stories, and just for fun, I started sending them out to publications to be rejected. Some rarely rejected, but I think that experience of like coming back to writing and remembering that I loved it gave me the confidence, maybe, or the curiosity to do it more and to do it in a more serious way, where I wasn't just writing and putting it in the cupboard, but I was like writing and sending it out to contests and to publications, and mostly getting rejected. But once in a while I would get some small crumb.
Well, there's a lot of like different ways we can kind of go based on that great intro. I think first of all, for me, it's cool because I have your book. If you look on the bookshelf behind me, I have a ton of books, but your book is there. So it's cool to kind of talk to the author of one of the books that I enjoyed reading. I guess we'll start off with kind of the angle that you live in, St. John's, Newfoundland, not very big. If not, I mean, you can tell me like what the size of the Tamil community is there, but I imagine not very big.
Oh, I think there's a joke about this. So I have one friend here who's Tamil, and recently there was a CBC guy who came to work here, and one more, and we can have a curling club. I don't actually know. I'm sure it's bigger. I just don't know who they are.
Yeah, I just feel like the East Coast in Canada is like underrated. Like, when you think of Canada, it's like, okay, Ontario, obviously, and then like BC, Alberta, but nobody really talks about kind of living, maybe St. John's or like Newfoundland is a nice place to visit, but nobody actually talks about kind of living there and the benefits.
Yeah.
And I imagine like, I'm a city, like a big city guy, so I can't imagine living in a smaller city, but I imagine like there's a reason why you've lived there for a while and like a reason why you enjoy living there. So maybe for the people listening, I'd love to kind of hear about what it's like living in the East Coast, specifically St. John's.
It's a really great place during a pandemic. Like things have been pretty open. um, but seriously, in terms of being a writer here, it's such a great place because there are so many writers, and not just writers, but like there are so many artists, working artists, and many people are just very generous and supportive, and there's not a feeling of, I mean, there is competition, of course. We're all like all our books are competing with everyone else's book, but somehow we still manage to kind of hold each other up, and that's been one of the best things. I don't know that I would become a writer if I hadn't moved here, partly because I maybe wouldn't have come back to writing in that, like, take a class kind of way. But also, once I took that class, I then found like a group of writers. And I don't know that would have really happened elsewhere. I keep, before the pandemic, I was promoting my book pretty heavily, going around for 2 years, and I kept going around the country and talking to other writers. And they were like, "You have a writing group. How does one make a writing group?" I would say, "Well, here all of you are in your place and you're all writers. Why don't you make a writing group?" But I don't know if there's a lot of writing groups here. So it's a great place to be a writer. And like, I love that it's I grew up, outside of Toronto. I spent a good part of my 20s in Toronto. I didn't think that I would be the kind of person who would like to go hiking. But apparently I am, which is also great for writing because you can just, when you're kind of stuck, you can just go out on a walk and yeah.
You kind of touched on something I was going to ask you, stole one of my questions, but what are the kind of jobs you did before you became a full-time writer? And like, what did they teach you specifically? Was there anything useful out of those experiences that kind of helped you in your current, writing career?
So this is not really a job, but my degree was in psychology, and it turns out that's a really good background for being a writer. There's like a number of editors and writers who came from a psychology background. So I feel like I'm using that. And then I had a first career in public relations, which is fantastic when you have to do the other part of, so there's the great part of writing, which everyone loves, everyone who's a writer, which is just being alone and putting your head down and doing your work. And often it can be jarring to make the switch to being a very public writer and talking about your work and getting up on stage and performing. And my background in PR really helped with that, because I don't have that kind of level of stage fright, and I'm relatively comfortable doing media and being on camera. And I sort of have an idea of, okay, you go into these like short interviews with an idea of what you want to say and just get it out quickly. So yeah, as a good, and just being able to think of yourself, this is really crass, but as a brand, because that is important if you want to sell your work. You can't really be too precious. There's like a line. I mean, I am very precious about my work, but also when you're trying to sell it, I'm not explaining that very well, but I think, yeah, a lot of the things that I learned on the job in public relations have really come in handy. And I have a lot of respect for my publicists, I think, as a result.
I think you're spot on in saying, I don't think it's crass. I think it's like just a reality that I think anything you do kind of creates, your brand in terms of what you put on social media, interactions you have with people. It's just like, people are just trying to like label people and put people in boxes. So that becomes your brand. So, Sharon, she's the writer, Era, he's this, or so.
Yeah.
I think it definitely makes sense. for me, and I think for many people, the idea of being a writer is a very romantic idea because, like, a lot of people out there like, oh, I want to write a book, or like, it seems like, oh, something that like anybody could do, but it's obviously so much work, and like, there's probably a low chance of success because it's a difficult competitive market. Like you said, a lot of eyeballs for the same dollars for kind of going towards books. So you know what made you, I guess, want to become a writer? And then I guess number two, obviously Boat People is kind of the big book that kind of got your name out there. What sparked the idea of writing that specific book? Because I imagine kind of the content and the story you're writing, it's not an easy one to write about. It's like a very heavy subject matter. And yeah, just maybe talk about that.
The trick is to decide you're going to write a much easier book and then trick yourself into writing the difficult book, apparently, is like how it happened. So you mentioned in the intro that the book was inspired by the MV Sunsea and the Ocean Lady. So those boats arrived. And when the Sunsea in particular arrived, I had just moved here a few months earlier to St. John's. So here I was on the East Coast watching this whole thing unfold on the West Coast and feeling in some ways very geographically far away from those people in those events. And then also in other ways, in terms of privilege, very far away because I'm a citizen. My family came here in the mid 80s when the doors were very open to Sri Lankans and Tamils. And our reception was so different. And I was also thinking about how the North is such a small place. I'm sure we're all related. I'm sure of it. And so what is it that really separates me from people on that boat? And I was also thinking about like why should Canada let me and my family in so easily and not let those people in so easily? Like there's nothing that separates us except for dumb luck, right? Timing and luck. And really how the country feels, like the mood of the country in the 80s was very different from the mood of the country. There was this great quote that I found when I was doing research, which was Mulrooney. He said, if we err, and this was talking about actually Tamil refugees who came on a life raft and to the coast of Newfoundland and were rescued. And he was being questioned, I think, in the House, and the opposition was saying, like, why are you letting these people in? We don't know who they are, blah, blah, blah. And he said, if we err, let it be on the side of compassion. And I thought, I cannot imagine Stephen Harper saying anything like that. And yet they like the same party, right? And what really changed is what changed the situation in Sri Lanka? No. What changed was the situation in Canada. And it just made me so, I was thinking a lot about how capricious the refugee system is and how capricious Canada is and how fickle we are as a nation in terms of who we decide to let in and how we decide to feel about refugees. And around the time, I was writing the Boat People for a while. And so midway through, it was 2015, and we were celebrating the 40th anniversary of the Vietnamese boat people coming. And we were really patting ourselves on the back in a way that just made me so angry, so angry. And so it was like all of those things really influenced my thinking about the first novel I wanted to write. But originally, the boat was going to be happening kind of off stage. And the characters, I had this idea for this like big, unwieldy, multi-generational Sri Lankan Canadian family. And they were going to be based in Toronto and the GTA. And this boat was going to be off in the background. And it would just be something they talked about. And it would be a way for me to explore how they felt about being Canadian versus Sri Lankan. And then at some point I thought, well, it'd be interesting if I had a character who was always going to be many characters. I thought it'd be interesting if I had a character who was like on the boat. And then Mahindan was in the story, and then he kind of took over. So it was not on purpose.
This episode is sponsored by nobody. That's right, nobody. So if you could be kind enough to hit that subscribe button, that would mean a lot to me. Yeah, I think a lot of the trends you talked about, I think there was the rise of kind of globalism, just kind of open borders, easy traversal of people, goods, ideas, like from country to country. And then I think what we're seeing in the last, I don't know if Trump kind of accelerated it, but just kind of this whole rise of nationalism and closed borders and, we don't need refugees. And it's crazy sometimes when I see people in the Tamil community also behave that way. And to your point, like, I came around the same time you did, and nothing separates us except luck, like how people in power felt about refugees and kind of, a growth and all that stuff versus how people feel about it now. So yeah, definitely the topic you wrote about is definitely a great topic for discussion among people. So in terms of like, I guess both people, obviously that the success of the book, brought new elements into your life. I mean, I don't know if you consider it famous or not, but like you are famous on some level, and obviously with fame comes certain kinds of good and bad. So most people think of the good, but in terms of like, has there been anything unexpected that has come as a result of like this newfound fame or attention you have because of Boat People?
Yeah, I mean, the success of the book was very unexpected. And I think partly it's because it was a debut novel and I didn't know what I was getting into. And so every step of the way, it just felt like everything was new and unexpected. This has been good and bad. Like readers reach out to me, which is often wonderful and amazing. But there's also a feeling of, and I know other writers feel this too, that readers want things from the author. They love the book so much and they feel they know the author and they want more. I just have nothing to give them. So it feels a bit like people always want things and I have nothing for them. So that's been unexpected and complicated to deal with. And then just the I wasn't expecting 2 years of solid, heavy travel and book promotion. And it's hard to be away from home and away from your people and your routines. And but even that said, it's also amazing, right? It's amazing to go places. It's amazing to meet readers in different places and feel that they connect with the book. So it's hard to separate. And that's the other thing I've unexpectedly found, or I found that was unexpected, is it's hard to separate the good parts from the bad. But, if it wasn't for the pandemic, I would have probably kept going last year. Like there were things that were booked that got canceled, which perversely I'm grateful for because it's not sustainable to be promoting for that long. And it's also not, for me anyway, I'm happiest when I'm writing. And when I was promoting, I just couldn't write. Yeah, so that's one of the nice things about the pandemic for me is I just get to stay home and write.
Do you feel this pressure because it was your debut novel, it did so well? Like to your point, like it was unexpected, like you just put it out there, great things came out of it. Do you feel this pressure now, like, oh, like your subsequent projects that you have to deliver, achieve that kind of success, or not at all?
No, not at all. I know that sounds so strange, and everyone says there's this curse of the sophomore novel. I sort of understand why there's a curse of the sophomore novel. And my second novel is like artistically working on it. It's really proving to be difficult. Like I keep writing novels and throwing them away, which is not how I wrote The Boat People. I just wrote a novel.
Yes.
I would like write lots of things and pull them away, but at least I was always working on one novel. But in terms of expectation, no. And I think part of it is because The Boat People did so well. I feel like I have a bit of room to maneuver, but I think a big part too is my publisher, McClelland and Stewart, is just very committed to allowing me to write a book that we all feel is a really solid book, not just get something out quickly because it's been a couple of years.
Do you have plans to kind of turn Boat People into like other mediums, like maybe like a film or like, yeah?
Yeah, people keep asking about this, and no, I'm working on something that might be stage related, but it's actually with some short stories, so totally not. No, I'm really done with The Boat People. I'm really done with it. And I think that's the other unexpected thing, is that I think writers or readers, because they have just read the book, and because of the way it ends, they want more. And people have asked me, they've asked, will I write a children's story based on Celian's point of view? Will I write like prequel or a sequel, or I think people are maybe expecting that I'll write another refugee related book, or like another book that's related to the Sri Lankan Canadian experience. And like, no, none of that.
That
I'm
makes
doing
sense.
something very, very different. I don't know. You spend so long with one thing and then you're like, okay, I'm done now. And also, it feels like the book doesn't belong to me anymore. These characters don't belong to me. They're out in the world. There are other characters now who are like um, jabbering away in my brain.
If
Yeah.
somebody approached you, like another writer, like say like a film director, like somebody famous, and they're like,
Mhm.
hey, we love what you did here. Can we option this, or like can we spin
Oh,
this off? Would you let people kind of take what you've created and kind of modify it, or like are you like, I'm just going to keep it as it is?
oh, I mean, if someone wants to buy the film or TV rights, please call my agent. Those are available. Those are definitely available. I don't know, like in terms of creative control, like we have had conversations with directors and it's clear that they don't want the same things and that I'm not interested. So I guess I feel like it doesn't belong to me, but also I wouldn't want it to become something that I couldn't feel proud of. So film rights are available, but I don't know how. I mean, I just sort of don't think it's going to happen because
Anybody listening that is currently a director or would like to be,
here
who to
and
contact.
okay, well, okay. So let's talk about this, right? Because
Okay.
people say, "Oh, I could see this being a movie," and yeah, okay, but who are the dark brown actors? Who are they? Because you would have to find unknown actors, and I think in order to get, from my very little understanding of how film and television works, to get money for big productions that involve boats and, involve boats, um, you probably have to have a big name actor attached to it.
Because
So who is it going to be? Right?
luckily, there's more and more, I guess, Tamils that are influential in Hollywood or in that space. So, like, I don't know if like Maitri Ramakrishnan or like Mindy
Oh, yeah.
Kaling. I have a couple of friends as
Yes.
well that are
Call
kind of,
me.
yeah.
Call my agent. Yes.
I have like a couple of
Yeah,
friends who are actors. I think there's like,
I
I
know.
think the talent is there.
I think she would make a great Priya.
Yeah, there you go.
Put
Put
it
it
out
out
there.
there.
Yeah. But
So
I would want it to be done right, not just like a light-skinned North Indian pretending to be Mahindan. Like, yeah,
I
yeah.
definitely think, I definitely think the talent is there to kind of represent the people the
Oh,
way
the
you want it
talent
to.
is there.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
talent is there.
It's just
But are
getting the
they
money.
recognized?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it'll be there maybe by the time if there is interest in the future.
Yeah.
Because like, these kind of things, like usually the book is written 5, 10 years ago and then somebody
Yeah.
decides to option it later. But who knows?
Yeah.
That kind of leads to kind of another question around the economics of kind of writing. So obviously you've made this a career. It's not obviously easy to do. So if there's someone listening that's like, hey, I want to eventually make writing my career, maybe break down how can somebody make a living? Like what are the different ways to make money being a writer?
Okay, so there's the advance and the royalties, right? Those come from the book. And then things like not just let's say the movie doesn't get made, but someone buys the rights. So there's like an option, you get money on that. If they buy the rights multiple times, you get, multiple pots of money. So that's great. Translations, overseas sales, that's all that's all ways to make money. So that's all ways to make money on the books that you write. And then depending on who you are, like if you're the kind of writer who's like has a good audience of readers and you've got a book coming out every year, then maybe that's enough. I don't know. For me, I have a pretty robust freelance business on the side. So I sometimes get commissions to do other artistic work, like this thing I'm going to be starting to work on now, which is like trying to translate some short stories to the stage. Um, so that's one thing. The other thing that I have really enjoyed doing is something called manuscript evaluation, where I work with other authors who are struggling or working through a manuscript. And I'm not acting as an editor, but we work together for a short period of time. They send me the manuscript. I give them very detailed kind of developmental edit notes, and then kind of help them kind of get over the hump of, okay, it's like for people who say, I have a draft, I know there are problems with it, but I can't figure out how to fix it, or I don't quite know where the problems are, but there's something wrong and I don't know how to fix it. I just offer an experienced, fresh set of eyes and really thorough, specific feedback. And then it helps them kind of do another draft and move on. So that's one part of my freelance. Before COVID, I was giving I was doing like public speeches and stuff. I had a speaking agent. That was a good source of income. That's gone. Yeah, it's really cobbling things together. And it's also learning what to say no to, which I was not good at for the first couple of years, but I'm starting to get better at.
Have you, because of COVID, I would just think of a lot of things where it's like you can do it remotely, but like these classes that you may have taken in person, have you ever thought of like being like, if there's aspiring writers to kind of teach classes around that?
Yeah, so this year, so one of the things I did, the other thing you can do is be a writer in residence, which I did this year. I was the writer in residence in the winter semester at Memorial University. And it was supposed to be, of course, in person. It was all like this. And so I just tweaked the setup a bit to make it. What I did was I gave a series of 4 workshops all online, and it just opened it up to more people, which was lovely. Because it would have been that I would have done them in person and it would have just been small group. But yeah, I mean, one of my kind of pipe dreams is to do something like a very small masterclass with like 4 or 5 writers and just work intensively for like a month or 5 weeks, where everyone brings in. This is something that I did as a student when I was learning to write with another writer named Sarah Selecki, and it was so valuable for me when I was just getting started with writing. And that's like it's my pipe dream, to figure out how to do it and then do it. But yeah, it would be something like working with 4 or 5 writers intensively for a short period of time on one project that they were working on, and really helping them with that one project, but also giving them tools that they could take into other work.
Where do you see the future of writing? Only because you look at kind of all the macro changes around, the demise of the independent bookstores, Amazon kind of taking over, technology creeping into kind of this world as well. Where do you, as a writer, are you like afraid for these changes and how they'll impact kind of your livelihood, or like how do you see this world of publishing and writing evolving?
I don't really think about it because I'm not a very commercial writer.
Got it. Okay.
So I think I'm a literary writer, which means I don't really make a ton of money off of my books. So yeah. And also, I don't know, I just don't really think about it. It's like self-preservation not to think about what Amazon is doing or like what AI is going to do. When I hear these things about like AI's writing books and people can't tell the difference, I just think, oh, maybe someone will give me an AI to write this next book for me.
Well, I think of the future of I think content writing, maybe maybe you can consider writing a literary book or just books in general around that. I just feel like content writing, I'm from the tech world, but I feel like content writing and like you said, this brand creation is going to be such an important part of any company or any person moving forward, and such an important skill to have. But I'm just curious, as someone in your shoes, how you see that world kind of evolving. But it seems like you're not really thinking about it, or it doesn't really bother.
I don't know,
isn't it?
I feel like the kinds of books I like to read and the kinds of stories I like to write are really focused on human experience and articulating something that we have all felt, but maybe have trouble putting into words, or that a reader has never seen that experience that they have felt recreated on the page. And maybe this is very naive, but I don't think a robot can do that.
Oh,
and I think as long as there are readers out there who want to see that, they'll they'll need writers like me, hopefully. Now, what the kind of the death of small independent publishers and small independent bookstores does to the availability of books, that worries me, but I also think that's not something that I can control apart from where I spend my dollars. That's all I can do.
Did you know that every time you left a 5 out of 5 review for this podcast, a Tamil parent lets their child pursue a career in the creative arts? Okay, that's probably not true, but if there's a chance that it is, do you really want to jinx it? Leave a review. Do it for the young creative in you. You talked about kind of, your brand and things like that before, and obviously part of brand creation, especially in this day and age, is around social media.
Mm-hmm.
How do you like view social media, and how do you use it for your line of work?
I don't. So I'm not on Twitter at all, and I have a professional Instagram that I don't update very often, and I feel like it's mostly like pictures of books that I really enjoy. And then my Facebook is like my private Facebook. It's not for work. I remember when we were about to publish The Boat People, my publicist said to me, don't do anything you don't feel comfortable doing. And that's such good advice. And then at some point along the way, someone said, you have to figure out at the beginning what you're going to do and what you're not going to do in terms of online presence. And they all said, the publishing house has presence, like don't worry about it. And I think those were both really good pieces of advice. And I'm very happy not being on there. I think it would just be more of a time suck. And I think it would also, I think it's too easy to tarnish your brand.
For sure, especially
with a poorly thought. Yeah, it's just too easy to tarnish your brand. It's too easy to jump on there and say something that you regret later, or that gets taken out of context. I do have, and I have a website, and I sometimes blog on there, and I just find that more enjoyable. I never found Twitter enjoyable. I was on there for a hot minute in like the 2010 or something. I got on there just because I was like, well, we got to do this at work, so I got to see what this is about, and I didn't really love it. So I don't know. I think you have to do what brings you joy.
I agree. Yeah. How's your journey kind of been with, you went from publicist, like a job that people understand, to like writing, which is like something that most people don't understand or kind of conceptualize. So with friends and family, how do they view this journey you've kind of taken, and has it changed after you've kind of achieved, call it material success with Boat People?
Yeah, so my parents really didn't they didn't get it. They didn't really get it until I think the book had been out for the better part of a year. And my dad, so my dad went to St. Thomas's in Colombo, and they have like old boys get-togethers or whatever, reunions, and they had like, I don't know what number special reunion, and my parents went to this dinner thing, and they were sitting at this table where the little place cards are out, and someone said, oh, are you related too? And then suddenly they got it. Because suddenly I was like popular or whatever, famous. I was like Sri Lankan Canadian famous in the community, and suddenly I feel like they got it.
So is this kind of a case of like external celebration kind of leads to internal validation? So because you were kind of known like in the outside the community, and you were kind of, quote unquote famous, they're like, oh, like suddenly your like choice of career and like what you did was validated by your parents and your community.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I remember when we made the book deal, which was 2 years before the book came out. I called my mom and I was like, okay, so here, like I like said the numbers. I was like, here's how much money they're giving me. So I was like, so you can see I'm a real paid writer. Like it's a real job. There's going to be a paycheck. And she was like, oh, okay. But she still didn't, she said like, okay, but we don't really understand this. Or something like that. I was like, yeah, okay, mom. But then I think, when the book was in stores, then they sort of started to see it, understand. And like when they saw me like on TV talking about the book and stuff. They understood it, but I still think it took a while. I think now they get it. I think they just didn't understand what it meant. And when I said earlier that I didn't think that writer was a real career, there's a reason for that, right? When I was growing up, there were no books by, I mean, the first, like, so Shyam's books, Shauna Singh Baldwin's books, those books, I didn't even see them until I was in my mid 20s. They existed before, but I didn't see them until I was in my mid 20s. So when you don't see yourself represented, of course you don't think that's a career for you. Of course not. Yeah. When I was a publicist, when I was working in PR, my parents had completely understood that. That makes perfect sense, right?
Do you see, are there any like up and coming Tamil writers that you know of that maybe we don't know of that we should be keeping an eye out on?
I can't think of any offhand.
Got it.
But yeah.
Well, if you think of any while we kind of chat, let me, it'd be kind of cool. I like to kind of see, like who is the next up and coming Sharon Bala or somebody equivalent. What keeps you going? Like, what's your big why of like why you do what you do?
Well, it's pretty great to be a writer. I had to say, it's pretty like some days I'm just like, oh, I get to do this for a living, and those are the days when I just get to write and when I make a breakthrough creatively on the page, when I figure something out or I'm in the flow state and like something is coming very easily.
How do you get yourself into the flow state? Like, what do you do?
Yeah, it's been a while since I've been there. It's been there's I mean, a lot of it is just on faith. I just have to like trust that it's going to come. But there are tricks. Like I sometimes try to read over something I've read before and try to get in the zone that way. Also, if I find talking with the people in my writing group about my work really helps, or even just talking about their work, just talking about work in general gets it going. Going out into I didn't realize how much I missed this actually until like soon after our first lockdown ended. Going out into the world and being able to see people and interact with them and watch them and see how people are reminded me of how other humans were. It's difficult for me to write characters if I don't have something to draw on, and it's not enough for me to just keep drawing on myself. So yeah, that's been helpful.
What's an insecurity that you have?
This flow state, getting in the zone that I'm never going to get back there again. Because when you're in it, it's magical. And you asked, how do I get into it? And I like what I'm saying is just like different tricks, but it's a bit like a trap door. It's somewhere in the woods and I just keep circling around, but like, it's almost like the trap door is always moving. I don't know. So like it's one of my big insecurities. I'm not going to be able to get to that place again. And like, it's so hard to write and it's impossible to write if I'm not there, or that like, I won't hear the characters talking in my head, that they're going to go away. Or I'm going to die before I get all the books written.
I know we talked a lot about work, but like, what do you like to do for fun to kind of, escape from, I mean, obviously what you do is fun, but obviously how do you escape from, the challenges of work and just to get your brain turned off around that?
Oh, turned off. It's not really fun, but I find going to the gym actually turns the brain off sometimes. Although sometimes in spin class, I'm like, and now it's all virtual, right? But sometimes in like this virtual spin class, like I look out the window of I want to get out of, I hate this so much. And then I just start thinking, this is another way, like I trick myself into the zone. I start, so I'll walk to the gym and I will be thinking about a thing I want to solve, or like, I don't know what this character is going to do next, right? I think about that on the way. And then when I'm in the spin class, I like astrally project myself out of this terrible room with this terrible bike. And I'm like alone in this class, like watching the guy on the video. Like, I hate this. and then I'll like go to the place with my imagination and the characters will start talking. That's one way. That's not really getting me out of, yeah. But I find hiking, I really love to hike, and like see friends and hang out with friends.
If money was not an issue, what would your dream day look like?
Not that different from what I'm doing now, but with no freelance.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm planning a little writing retreat in a couple of weeks where I'm taking my dog and I'm going to a cabin and with a friend who's also hoping to do some writing. She's an academic and her dog, and we're hoping the two dogs like keep each other company. Um, and I'm hoping just to get lots of writing done and some hiking in, and that's like perfect.
So it sounds like you're not too far away from kind of your dream life already, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's honestly pretty good. I can't complain. Being a writer is pretty fantastic.
If you're thinking about personal legacy, I love kind of asking around this is
Mhm.
how would you want your friends and family to describe you in a few sentences, like around your personal legacy?
Oh, this is unrelated to writing.
Yep, I mean, if like as Sharon Bala as a person, but if writing is predominant part of who you are, whatever you deem to kind of be your personal legacy.
I think they're going to say she asked a lot of questions, which is true to my life and true to my work.
If you had a chance to kind of go back in a time portal and visit 16-year-old Sharon, what would you, what would you tell her?
Write everything down. What you're feeling right now, write it down. Keep it like actually keep a journal. Don't be lazy about it. And that's it. That's all I would say because I wouldn't want to jinx it. I wouldn't want to do a thing that sets myself on a different path that doesn't end up here.
Here.
Yeah. Yeah. But except that I would like to have better journals that were because it's hard. You feel so much when you're young. You like everything is so heightened and it's impossible to go back. Like I was just talking to someone about this recently about how it's my dog barking. Sorry.
No worries.
About how I have very strong memories of like from like 19 on, but nothing before that. Yeah, and a while back in a different novel that got thrown away, I was trying to write about a teenager, and it was so hard to remember what it was like to feel that age.
That's a good point, actually. Journaling is one of the things that I was trying to do more of, and I did it until the twins arrived. But
Yeah.
I feel like it's
Oh,
because
yeah, you should write it because it would be for them.
yeah, even like I was just thinking about like I did a trip, one of my first trips ever with like a bunch of friends in Europe, and I journaled every day on that trip. And I remember
Oh, wow.
finding the journal. It was one of the few times like I journaled when I was younger, and there's like all these funny things that I like only these funny things that had happened that I forgot about that I only remembered because of the journal. I'm so like, I should probably journal more because there's probably like a lot more that happens than I probably
Yeah.
give credit for. So it's probably a good habit to pick up on.
Mhm.
What's like a book or podcast that you like have consumed that you would like recommend to people listening or like that's had an impact on you personally?
Oh, oh, there are so many. I
Yeah.
mostly just listen to podcasts. That's how I get all of my news. My new news source is The Take, which is the Al Jazeera daily podcast on the news. I find it's really interesting. They have like a wide ranging interest in all parts of the world. They have an interesting take that is so different from others. So that's one, and then there's another one that's sort of new to me since the pandemic, which is Throughline, which is NPR's history podcast, and they kind of look backward in time and look at events backward in time, but they look at how and like when they're looking backward in time, it's really also looking about how they shape the present moment. So one excellent episode was on Marcus Garvey, and I remember learning about Marcus Garvey in school, and it was all wrong. What I learned in school about Marcus Garvey was all wrong. For me, thinking about the project I'm working on now, so I was listening to this podcast about Marcus Garvey, and that was interesting because I got to learn about him. But also, I was thinking about charisma and how charisma works and how he had so much of it, and how people with charisma can convince anyone of anything. I mean, he convinced people to like buy shares in a boat that was going to take them to a new country where they would get to start again. Like, it's such a wild idea. Um, And who was he as a person that he believed that, but also made other people believe that?
I think one thing we've learned, if anything, in the last couple of years, especially more recently, is history definitely isn't told accurately. Like if you look at the
Mm-hmm.
Aboriginal story in Canada,
Yeah,
African Americans in the U.S., just stories aren't told accurately in schools, and that's
at
something that
all.
it's got to, because
Yeah.
those stories are powerful. Because I remember just not knowing any Aboriginal or First Nations people directly, but all my impression was what I was taught in books, and it was a
Yeah.
negative perception of if I never met First Nations people after the fact, it would have stuck this negative perception that I read in books, which is crazy. So stories are definitely
Yeah.
very powerful.
And it's not even, sometimes it's very subtle.
Yes.
Like sometimes it's like, oh, all they were good for, all they did was scalp people, you know? But other times it's like just, it's very subtle. Like I've been thinking about the way that I was listening to an episode of Media Indigena, and they were talking about quote unquote res dogs. So dogs from who are mostly free range, let's say, in remote northern communities. And like people from the South go in and they say, these dogs are not being taken care of. We're going to take your dogs. It's like, who gets to decide how dogs should be? Because, you know, and like, what's that based on, that decision? Is it based on how the dogs actually are? Or is it based more on perceptions of the people there, that other like outsiders have come in with those perceptions already?
Or even like things
Yeah.
around one of the things I often read or saw in the media was like the portrayal of like First Nations people with alcohol abuse, but
Mm-hmm.
they don't really go into like on its own it sounds like bad, but like if you understand the underlying issues of why there's higher alcohol consumption in the community and like just what's
Yeah.
happening, you'd understand that it's like more of a symptom of a deep rooted problem that has to be
Yeah.
fixed before
Yeah.
talking about that. So I definitely
And
agree.
it's like those are the only times we talk about those, about certain people, is in these
Yes.
contexts. Like they don't, they get flattened, and it's
Yes.
not like the full story of a community,
Yep.
like just this one aspect, which is then taken out of context, as you said, taken out of historical context.
Yep. No, for sure.
Yeah.
Money can be hard to come by, but here's a $100 opportunity for you. Join my free newsletter for free exclusive content and a free chance to win $100 when I hold special draws. Did I mention that it's free? What's like a new belief, behavior, or habit that's maybe transformed or changed your life in the last couple of years?
A new belief, behavior, or habit. I don't know. I just got a puppy and it's pretty much changed everything. It's like seriously changed the way I work.
Yep. No, I can
Yeah.
definitely attest to that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And
who?
you got like kids. You got like
Yes.
real kids.
I think a puppy or a child. It's like I know that people don't look at it the same, but I think it's equivalent. It's like
Totally.
another creature, in this case, human beings that rely on you for a
Yeah.
lot of things. So definitely see that. Who's one person in the global Tamil community, or just anybody that you kind of admire and why? And who's somebody that's not Tamil in the global community that you kind of, admire and why?
It's super cheesy to say my dad.
No, not at all. That's
Is that
that's
what
one of
everyone says?
Well, I mean, I've had a percentage of people like that said their parents for obvious
Yeah.
reasons, and then yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Like when I think about what my mother is Sinhalese. But when I think about what my parents did at a very young age, like the risks they took, um, and like the turning points in life, and how when they came to Canada, and I couldn't really appreciate this until I was older, really. But when they, when we came, I was 6. My sister was 9 months old. We brought my grandmother. Um, you know, my dad had been a civil engineer working in Dubai, making good money, like working at something he loved. And then suddenly he couldn't be a civil engineer here and had to start again with a new career, and like really against his will, right? It wasn't like when I switched careers. Um, and how they just put their heads down and did it and never griped about it. And yeah, I don't know. I made a move from Toronto to here, and it just seemed like the most difficult thing in the world.
like I think the
you know,
I think the crazy thing is like we can because we're so like tech literate and we can kind of figure out like if I have to move somewhere, I just look up on Google where do I move,
mm-hmm.
what's around, I'm thinking like you said, like your parents, my parents, they travel like literally halfway across the world. No Google Maps, like no way of, or knowledge of understanding navigating airports and like different
Yeah.
countries, and like not even clothing. Like I think of that Tim Hortons commercial with like, the family arriving from Africa, somewhere like somewhere else from the world, and like they're like inadequately dressed for the Canadian
Hmm.
winters. Like so it's just
Yeah.
crazy that they did all of that, and then they had kids, and like they managed like very little money that they made because of the careers that they have to, or the jobs they have to take on. And then I think
Yeah.
of people in our generation that like, we
So spoiled.
we complain way more. I mean, it's understandable and not so understandable, but it's just like we had it way easier than they do, but we find a way to not understand that. So that's something I'm
Yeah.
reflecting on personally. But yes.
Yeah. I don't know how I guess you just do it.
Yeah.
I guess you just do it.
And
I don't know
who's
how.
somebody that isn't Tamil that you admire?
There are a number of writers I admire, like Zadie Smith and Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, who are not just brilliant on the page, but are also very inspiring speakers and really have like the way that they think. I'm really interested in the way that they think, and I think their fiction and their nonfiction is powerful because they think in these deep ways, and because their interests are so wide ranging. And that's the kind of writer, thinker, intellectual person I want to be. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, that's a kind of a good segue into our final segment, which I call Creator Confessions. It's kind of meant to be a speed round. I'm going to say a bunch of statements, and you just kind of say the first thing that kind of pops into
Okay.
your mind. Ready?
Yeah.
Awesome. So, favorite Tamil food?
Oh, Kontaroti, man, you make me so sad. I can't have it. This is the problem with living here. I can't get it. I can't
Would
get
you,
it. I have to
it,
make it.
if you had to pay like a $20 like convenience fee or like some kind of crazy fee to get like a single plate of kothurati, would you do it?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Easily, easily. Do you know the kitchen gorilla?
Yes,
Your
yes,
kitchen
Rosh.
gorilla, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I follow on Instagram. And my mom just, I guess she just discovered him. She was like, do you know about these things? I can send you a care package. I was like, yes.
Yeah, his stuff is really good. He's doing some great stuff. Something that scares you.
uh like the idea of doing anything like a bungee jump or jumping out of a plane, forget it.
You're scared of heights.
Yeah, I wouldn't
Okay.
have thought so, but I discovered this a couple of years ago when we did this one hike where we were walking up a mountain on scree and we couldn't actually come down that way. And I was like, oh, I just have like heart palpitations. I was like, oh, I'm afraid of heights. It's late in the day to realize.
That I knew about myself a long time ago. I'm terrified of heights, lightning, and snakes. Favorite show you're watching?
I'm watching anything at the moment. I don't think I'm watching anything at the moment. Isn't that embarrassing?
Not at all. I would love to have that kind of discipline. TV's a time suck. Um, a place you're itching to travel to after the pandemic is over.
Oh, oh, there are a couple. But London, England is like one of my favorite places in the world, and I have family there.
Mm.
So I'd like to go there. And then I really, really, so I think I'm going to try to go this year before the year is up to see my parents in
Mm.
Ontario. Yeah, I'd love to. And like, it's not just a place, like where I want to travel to is like Christmas 2019 with like a big family party. Like that's,
You're looking forward to?
yeah, not just a place, but like
Yeah.
a place with people and
Yeah.
yeah.
A fellow Tamil creator that you want to give a shout out to.
Ooh, tough one. Um, Probably Chaim Salvadori, just because his books were the first time I saw myself.
Uh,
Yeah.
your favorite childhood memory.
Oh, Christmases. Oh, yeah, Christmases. We would have all of our cousins would come and aunties and uncles, and like everyone would sleep in the house, like on sleeping bags on the floor. And by sleeping bags on the floor, I mean, we didn't have enough for everyone. So just like open the sleeping bag up and like put, and my cousins and I would put on these, like, this is very embarrassing. We put on these like little Christmas pageanty playthings for like the parents on Christmas night. Yeah, sometimes we would like sell little tickets.
That's awesome. Pet peeve.
So many.
You can only name one.
Yeah, people who are lazy, who I have to work with. Like, I hate working with people who are lazy. And when you were in school and you were a kid and like you had a group project and people wouldn't do their part of the work, that still happens as an adult. And it just makes me.
I agree. A person or celebrity that you look up to.
Oh, these are tough. I mean, I think I'm gonna have to go back to those writers I mentioned.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you knew that you were going to die tomorrow, a regret that you would have.
I didn't finish this book. That's a real one. Like, yeah. Because I came to writing late, and because I'm the kind of writer who's very slow, I sometimes think about, am I going to get all the books done? Yeah.
Age you want to retire. And when I say retire, I preface that by saying I think of retirement as basically you get to do what you want when you want. Not like having this boatload of money, but basically ownership of time. I
think I already have that.
It sounded like it, but I wanted you to say it.
Yeah, I think I already have that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Which is pretty cool.
I don't know how long it'll last for, is the only thing.
It's okay. Enjoy it.
It's the kind of thing where it's like, I have to come out of retirement.
Celebrity whose life you want to experience for one day.
Oh, wow. Is there any celebrity whose life I'd want to experience for one day? No, I don't think the fame is great. I don't know, the fame. So here's the thing about that, right? Celebrity comes with fame. I don't want the fame.
Not even for one day, just to see how it was.
Oh, I think it'd just be bad. Like, give me the wardrobes and stuff. Okay. And then I think that if it was someone's life who was actually really great, I would be sorry to come back to my own. But I also just don't think anyone's life is that great. I think I'm just very comfortable in my life, and I think I would be, yeah.
And finally, just like I guess a final piece of advice for any aspiring fellow Tamil creators out there, like whether they're just kind of general advice or even specific to writers.
Don't think that you can't do it because you can't see yourself. Although I think definitely now there are more Tamil people like doing all kinds of things that we were not doing before, like being on Netflix shows.
Yes.
It's okay if your parents don't get it. They will eventually. It's okay if they don't.
They will when they see your upfront payment.
They will when they're like in a room full of Sri Lankans and they say, "Is this your child?"
Yes.
And they can say, "Yes, it is."
Awesome. Well, that's a great way to kind of end off the podcast. Sharon, this was really good episode. Enjoyed kind of hearing, and really like the fact that you're I think you're one of the few guests that I've heard that are just super comfortable with kind of where they're at in life. And, interesting that you kind of are living, quote unquote, a retired life, which is pretty cool.
I think the feeling comfortable is like, I'm 42. I mean, I think that's part of it. I think that just comes with age as well.
You'd be surprised. In terms of, if there's somebody, I know you don't like the fame, but if say somebody listening to this podcast is super inspired by your journey as a writer and just kind of some of the thoughts you've shared and they want to connect with you, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
The best way is on my website, sharonbala.com, and there is a contact page. And there's like a form to fill out. All of that just comes directly to my email. It doesn't go to anyone. So you're coming directly to me. But yeah, that's the best way. That's the best way.
Well, thank you again for kind of hopping on the podcast, and for everyone listening. Look forward to having you or listening to the next episode. So thank you again, Sharon.
Thank you.